We'll wait for it to start recording. I think it was recording has started. We're ready. Good. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for the first of many sales podcasts to come. We've got the absolute legend, Brad Schow, on the phone. What I would normally do is introduce my speaker and share a little bit about who they are, but I'm going to butcher Brad's experience and really the value that he brings to calls and anyone he's in the room with. So Brad, please take it away. Introduce who you and what makes you Brad Schow.
Yeah, Alex, thanks. It's a complicated story. I'm a complicated guy, Alex. Here's my background. I was a tech, and I started working at an MSP, and that MSP didn't have owners that wanted to really run the business. So I started running the service department, then running the business. And then we got to the point where we grew that thing, and we were like killing it, but they got tired of the change that was happening as we were growing. So I sold my shares to my partners, and I went down and I joined the organization called HTG that ran peer groups that I was a part of, where we worked with hundreds of businesses then doing the same thing that like we helped learn how to do when we were growing ours. And I did that for like 5 or 6 years, and then ConnectWise bought that peer group business that I was a part owner in. And so now I'm part of ConnectWise. And so here's what I bring to the table, Alex, that I think is I've been able to benefit and help other people. Like I was a tech, then I was a service manager, then I was a general manager, then over in the UK they would call it managing director, right? Like I was that guy. Then I sold my shares. And then I was a COO at HTG, and we grew that internationally. So I spent a lot of time in EMEA, a lot of time in Australia, working with partners, helping them figure out how to grow their business. I did all of that. Then I came to ConnectWise, and now I work as part of like a much bigger organization that's funded by private equity that has a whole different set of dynamics. So my experience goes from like a little 2 or 3 man shop all the way up to a big SaaS company where I help run community and do thought leadership and everything in between. And I've gotten to work with hundreds and hundreds of partners to, learn from them and then help share what I've learned.
So there's 2 things, just a bit of clarity to start with. Firstly, run us through what an MSP is, because we understand what that acronym is. Some people listening might not. What does an MSP stand for? And in a sentence or two, what do they do?
Yeah, it's a great point. So an MSP, managed service provider, the businesses that we primarily work with are generally smaller businesses that are taking care of the IT, like computer and networking and security and internet needs of other small businesses, right? Like they don't have an expert on staff. So we take care of them. And the business model that we use to take care of them, it's called managed services, where they will just pay so much, like a small business will pay so much a month for us to do whatever they need to take care of those issues, right? Be help desk, be network architect, do the whole thing.
So instead of having, say, an internal IT team to manage my environment, my servers, my backups, my patching, I would have an MSP that would run something like that for me, and they would either take the responsibility of that or they would support me vastly through that experience. Cool. So there's something else I want to touch on, because it's that journey you alluded to of I started as a techie. So I understand the language and I understand level 1 tickets all the way up to level 2, level 3, level 4 tickets, right? I understand almost the full spectrum, but then I also understand logistics. I also understand operations. Run me through your thoughts of how did you make that progression? And the reason I'm asking this question is because one of the things we focus on with our peer groups now, Evolve, and a lot of the stuff that we're doing is we talk about best in class. What are the best doing that I can share down the chain so that you, a smaller MSP or smaller business, can copy this to eventually grow? So run me through the thinking thoughts for you from going from, let's say, junior level tech, not low level tech, because every job has its relativity. Everything is important at its level. The junior level tech, run me through that thinking change that you initially went through to start taking on more responsibility.
Yeah, boy, there's so many ways I could take this. Do you want me to talk?
We will spin this back to sales. I promise. Eventually,
we will.
Okay. Well,
I can talk about.
We'll come back to sales.
I'll start on the service side though, because this is what happens. Because usually you have to get your service up to a certain level of maturity before you can really start layering sales on the top of it, other than the owner just going out and selling, right? But if you want to build sales into your organization, there's a certain level of maturity you have to have on service. And here's what that looks like. Like when you're small, you do I call it AFAB, anything for a buck. You're doing anything for a buck. And then your service team is really just a bunch of cowboys. Like you have 3 or 4 or 5 people that do anything and are expected to do everything, very relational with your customers. And it serves you really well until it doesn't. And then you get to the point where like it's so inefficient to have everybody do everything that you start to have to grow up. You have to mature your service a bit. And that's where business leadership all of a sudden gets tough, because you have to tell people, you don't get to do projects anymore. We're going to have this guy do projects. And then they're like offended and they leave. And then you got to rehire people. And all of a sudden it gets complicated. And that's when you're really running a business, right? Like when after, yeah, I shouldn't say that. If you have 5 or 6 employees, you're doing great. But you're going to have to figure out how you mature. And what I learned was, like, every time like you add 3 or 4 people, you have to reinvent like how you're running your business and how you do what you do from a maturity standpoint.
So I'm gonna tackle that in a second. And because where I'm going to take the conversation in a second is, you mentioned something really important there, which is owner-led focus to start with.
Right.
And then the transition of scaling and adding people to teams. So what I want to just quickly talk about is, let's go back a conversation. What does that, how do I understand if I'm ready for the next phase of business? What's a very clear benchmark? Is it the number of tickets we're receiving a day? Is it the amount of time my techs are spending, average tech time to resolve a ticket? How do I know when I'm ready for the next phase? And then we'll talk about actually how do I grow into it. And just to add some context, the reason I'm asking this question is because a lot of businesses that I work with in sales, one of the questions I asked is, have you tested your service desk? So if I suddenly throw 50 extra tickets for your desk tomorrow, can you handle it? Because what I don't want to do as a sales leader or sales training that I do, I don't want to teach your guys to sell 2 times, 3 times what capacity is at the moment. If you can't handle it, because we're over promising and under delivering. So there's a reason I'm asking that question. How do I know if I'm ready for that next jump?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's Alex, there's 2 kinds of people in the world. There's people that make decisions based on gut feel, and there's people that make decisions based on data.
Oh God, which one are you, Brad?
I'm a gut feel guy. I'm a gut feel guy. Right. And but here's what I do then, and I try to do this in a intellectually honest way. As I'm making my gut feel decisions, I'm looking for data to support my decision. I don't want to say to back up, because there's a bias. I mean, you can make data say whatever you want to say, which is part of my problem with data, right?
So you ever heard that thing of like people they buy with emotion and justify with logic? You ever heard of this thing?
Exactly. Right.
It's the same kind of thing, right?
It's funny. Like I'm fascinated by how people work, and we've talked a little bit about that. And it took me a while to realize that people make decisions. The decision-making part of your brain is wrapped around the emotional part of your brain, not the logical part of your brain. So as a tech, I used to think you could convince people of the right thing. And what I learned after years was, like, you have to change their emotions around the decision if you want to get them to actually say yes. Sales. Right. And that's now trust, right? We are talking sales, because at the end of the day, in my mind, every salesperson is just selling trust. Like that. And it's all if you boil it down, that's what every salesperson is selling.
I'm laughing, Brad, because I was doing a piece of training with Amazon Web Services, and someone said to me, like, simplify sales down to like, if I just want to grasp what sales is, simplify it for me. And that's sales is nothing more than trust and results.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So the trust is the integrity at the start of the call. It's the credibility. It's I'm on your side on the table. And the results are, I'm going to stay around long enough as your account manager, as your sales rep, as your point of contact at this company, to let you witness the results that I say are possible. And that's where you build, because one of the things I talk about, and this is something I'd love to maybe talk about in another call, is referral marketing and sales, and the power of Brad saying to Scott Scroggin, something like that. And it's only, I only mention those names as Scott Scroggin because we both know him. But it's the power of Brad saying to Scott, you've got to go and talk to ConnectWise. These guys, they're in that power, but this is a different conversation. But the trust side of sales, and that staying around long enough to see the results. And this is where I taught under promise, over deliver. So what we do the whole time is I don't try and sell anything. I'm not trying to sell to you. I'm trying to identify the whole time, can I actually help you? If not, who do I know that can do it better? Powerful stuff. So there's two things. We've got about 8 different conversations already open. So I'm going to try and just channel it back into that maturity question of like one sentence answer. How can I kind of gauge when I'm ready to really add new people, more people to my organization, both service and sales, because it's almost chicken and egg.
Right. So I'm going to give you a short 2-part answer. The first, when you're first starting out and you're trying to grow your business, and again, I go back to feeling based. It's when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of whatever change you think you need to make, right? Like you almost get to a breaking point where you're like, I just can't do this the way we've been doing it. I have to go the other direction. Like that because it's hard. And the reason why it's hard is I'll go to the data side. And we do a lot of analysis of the financial side of small businesses, and most people that are running their business, they know the revenue, they maybe know margin, they know if they're bringing something to the bottom line, but they don't a lot of times understand, how do I unpack my financial statements to understand how much I can afford to spend on something, right? Like they're not looking at it at that level. And what you don't quite realize on a financial statement is, if you bring somebody in and you pay them like a reasonable wage, it's such a massive blow to, does my business model still hold up? That like a lot of times what happens is people make hiring decisions premature, or they don't have a plan to increase revenue. They just want to reduce the pain, but they don't have a plan to increase revenue. And so they may short term decrease the pain, but then they can't afford it, and they have to then let go of that person because they didn't have the plan to increase revenue. So like you have to manage both of those things, right? Like when it's time, like you got to make a change. But if you're going to make a change, you better have a plan for, how am I going to increase revenue to justify that person coming on? So, it's not enough to make the pain go away.
No, and this is a really good point, because if we look at the average ramp time to get an effective, even if you look at tier 1 or BDR, so level entry role for either sales or tech, average between 6 to 9 months to ramp that person up to become effective. And effective means that they are paying their wage back in the service they are delivering, right? I know that sounds very clinical, but that is, unfortunately, we all get hired to do something. We all get hired to do a job. So we need to look at, well, how long does it take for me as a business owner or as a sales director to break even on that person? So amazing point that you've just mentioned.
And Alex, related to that is, most business owners they learn about hiring by hiring service people first, and that window is much shorter. You can take a tech and make them productive and financially generating revenue or covering tickets much faster than a salesperson is going to start bringing in new business. And so they get conditioned to, if I make a hire, I know within a month or two, if my service department is more productive, is generating more like work out of the people that we have. But when you try to hire a salesperson, to your point, it's 6 to 9 months. So if you don't have like a pot of money there to kind of help cover the salary until that person can ramp up, and then we can talk about this all day. It's fascinating to me. But then if you make the wrong hire, you don't find out for 6 or 9 months, and now you're going to start all over. So now you're actually talking about a year to a year and a half if it takes you kind of two shots to find the right person.
And ignoring the revenue it's cost.
Exactly right. Can your business afford it? Like, do you have that? And a lot of times they don't. I mean, they do for a few months, and then they really start to feel it, and then they pull the ripcord and say this isn't working, but then they're back to where they were when they started. Like nothing's really changed.
And what I think would be great, because something I'm going to what I want to transition into now is the owner led, and so what I want to talk about now is owner led.
Yeah.
Because one of the biggest things I train is actually this transition. It's either merge acquisition, so that muddy water. The owners have stepped away now. What's the value, and how do we keep the existing relationships, both internal colleagues, employees? How do I keep external relationships, customers, bottom 5%? Top 5%, everyone in between. So that's the stuff what I deal with. That's my bread and butter. So we can maybe talk about that another day. But the question I want to ask two questions now. Someone might be listening to this and thinking, well, okay, well, what's the answer? Because you've just described me, which is a lot of, by the way, and I don't think we can share the data on how many MSPs are like we're discussing now, where their profit margins are not nil and void almost. These decisions almost cripple them. And that takes them 9 months to recover. Let's not name statistics or dates. That's irrelevant. I can imagine a lot of people were in that place. What I want to now talk about, though, is how does an owner solve that? And then that will probably transition us into how does an owner build a team and relieve responsibility of bringing in those top accounts?
Yeah. Oh, this is it's funny. I'm building a bunch of material around this.
Brad.
I'm building a bunch of material around this because I've seen it happen over and over, and it pains me to watch like companies try to do this. So there's a number of things. One, like here's the first thing that comes to mind. You need to have a financial plan. That's first, right? Like just that piece we talked about, which is not super difficult to figure out. But here's the reality. Small business owners buy from small business owners. And what I mean by that is, especially in the business that I'm in, when you're taking care of somebody's computers and their networks, nobody is going to write a $2 or a $3 or a $5 or a $10 or a $20,000 a month check to like a young, inexperienced salesperson if that's the only relationship they have in the business. So one of the biggest mistakes I see the owners making as they're trying to ramp this up is you can't replace yourself with a new salesperson. What you need to do is take the whole stack of things that you need to do to sell, which is do some marketing, get a first call, get an appointment, sell the trust. You can begin to I'll use the term sort of delegate parts of that to a new salesperson, but ultimately you're still going to need to be involved because that small business is not going to buy from a new salesperson. They just, because you're selling trust and the trust isn't there, right?
So let's just quickly summarize this point. Let's just double click on this a second and just condense what you're saying. So what you're essentially saying, if I've heard this right, and I'm almost repeating what I think I already know, the new sales rep coming in will not have the credibility to say, hey, Brad, right, your CRO, your COO, trust me with your infrastructure, trust me with your responsibility to your client. But the owner understands the logistics of what your role is, and you can own that trust. But what the BDR, what's the junior needs to come in and do, it's almost act as a PA, VA, a junior level individual, booking the meetings, doing the prospecting, but letting the owner drive the meeting, drive the relationship still, but just at scale.
Right. And you teach them to start to have, how can you have open-ended trust-based conversations? You teach them to say, look, I work for an IT company and we do great work with businesses like yours. Would you be willing to sit down with the owner of the company and have a conversation about how we might be able to help? That's a conversation they can go have, and nobody's offended at that conversation. I could probably do that, right? But if he sits down and says, will you write a check for my company to take care of your stuff? It's a non-starter. It's just not going to work.
And this is really interesting, because one of the things I'm transitioning towards now is working with 19, 24-year-olds around. There's a guy in the UK called Daniel Priestley, and he does a ton of work around something called the KPI, which is the key person of influence. And what he talks about is that, my way of saying it is that your network is your net worth. And you're never too young to start building your network of people that you can add value to and be a connector of or to. So the reason I'm sharing that is because what a lot of junior level people, especially if they want to be recognized in the job market in this day and age, is I can get you an appointment with these people and this is how I can do it. And leading with that on an interview, because I think a lot of owners, there's going to be a lot of smaller businesses that a lot of people are going to transition out of these big tech companies and all this stuff and start up their own shops, right? And they're going to need these junior level people that understand, they understand the need and the importance of prospecting, but you need to make the tea to start with. You cannot come in and expect to be an SE, a sales executive, or a closer out the back. Or I don't call it a closer, I call it a progressor. But you cannot expect to close opportunities off the bat. You have to sit alongside Brad, understand the lingo, and let's ask this question then, Brad. What time frame for a salesperson to become competent in, let's just not even look at security, let's just look at BSM, business management solutions, all of this stuff, to become competent in CRMs, billing, accounting, whatever, PSA stuff? What is a rough time scale for someone to become competent?
Well, my experience has been, and I'm working with a few partners now where we're building a bunch of material around this. My experience has been like for them to understand at a comfort level where they don't have to think about it too hard when they're having the conversation, it's 4 to 6 months for them to just like be comfortable having the conversation. If you want to talk about, do they come in with a level of confidence where it seems like they've done it for a while? It's closer to a year. And if you want them to execute well with speed and be able to really think on their feet if things go, not quite according to plan, that's closer to 18 months. It goes back to what I was talking about. It's completely different on the sales side than it is on the technical side. And a lot of owners have a technical progression mindset in their head. And you gotta get rid of that. You gotta think more like, this is relationship and trust we're selling. And they have to learn the language and the environment and the culture enough to comfortably represent your company that way. And it takes time. It takes way more time than you would think.
And Brad, you've inspired a thought for me here, and something I've been pushing for, my gosh, I couldn't tell you how many years now, is you never sell the product, you sell the outcome, right? And you don't even sell the pains and all of this stuff. Like, if we read anything of champion sale, if you read anything around that, really good mindset of the fact that people do not want product information. I can Google stuff. The power of the internet and whatever we're seeing with machine learning these days will allow me to go and become more knowledgeable than probably the sales teams and whatever else, right? So what people want is roadmap. What people want is the idea of, I'm going to make a decision regardless, right? Help me make the decision and tell me what happens once I've made that decision, right? So run me through how you balance between product knowledge and technical acumen and like pipeline, because there is, just to add a bit of context, we are both witness to a lot of companies pushing product into people's faces. We've got the latest X. Our features and benefits can do Y for you. Run me through how a business, and even different maturities, if we want to look at that, or just how does a business get off that bandwagon of, we are the best features and benefits and look how shiny this is? How do I get into that? And what should junior level to top level account manager, what should people be talking about in your opinion?
It's a good question. And what the approach that we took, which worked well, was we ingrained in our new salespeople that their job is really to sell a relationship with our company. Like, not the technology, not the solutions, sell a relationship with our company. And when they went in with that mentality, what it allowed us to do was then we could pull the right people internally that had the confidence in the technical side and in the like, what's a delivery piece going to look like. And we then asked the salesperson to almost project manage, bring in the people that know the trust on the technical side, bring in the people that know the trust on how we do projects, and let them sell that for you. So we asked our salespeople basically to sell the relationship and project manage in the sales process when we bring the right people in until they became comfortable after they heard 5 or 10 or 15 sort of pitches by the people that were comfortable selling that stuff, then they could take it further themselves. So over time, like they got soak time in hearing, what does a pitch sound like? What, like if somebody has an objection or a question, how do we answer those questions? You then knew when they were comfortable, and then you could let them take more of the sales process and own it on their own, right? That was the approach that we took to get them productive over time.
And if now we're talking about, in the context you've given there, you're talking about Connect Wires we've got 15 different people that can turn up to one call.
Yeah.
If I've got an SA, a solution
Yeah.
architect, or I've got a senior technician and a salesperson, junior level salesperson, how do I balance who to bring to the call to not waste people's time? And do I get a junior level person to do this early, or do I bring a solution guy on to qualify? How do I balance that? Imagine I don't have 15 different people to bring to a call. What do I do? How do I handle that?
Yeah, well, so here's the tension I think you have to build. If you have a whole team of people that are taking care of things, right? Like that. And when I was talking about what we did that even when our company was only 10 people. Like, and that's from owner to the whole thing, right? Like there was a service manager, there was an owner, and so a new salesperson was almost like basically an account manager who would say, hey, like you should come and look at our company. Let me introduce you to our service manager. Let me introduce you to our owner. And they would begin to build that trust until that account manager got there. If you have a whole team that are taking care of people, like here's the tension you have to build into that dynamic, I think. One is you got to, like, you have to clearly define roles. Like what is your job? Like what is the part of the sales process that we need you to move forward, right? You have to balance that, but then you have to have, I'll go back to sort of the feeling thing, which is you have to have a plan for them to get so that they confidently know what they're doing. Because I go back to, again, if you're selling trust, right? Another way of wording, if you're selling peace of mind, a buyer can smell a lack of confidence or a lack of like authority and autonomy in a salesperson. And so even if they're being asked to do just a piece of the sales process, while they're getting confident in that, you better have a backup plan for them. Like, can you bring somebody else in the call to help you learn those things until you are confident, and then you can do it on your own, right? So it's a long answer, but if I'm selling, and I'm not a salesperson, but I've learned how to sell watching from other people. Here's how I sell. If somebody asks me a question and I realize that I don't have a confident answer, you're much better off telling them, look, I don't know the answer to that. I'm either going to get the answer, or I'm going to find the person that can answer that for you. You have to give them the freedom as a salesperson to be able to, like, if you're asking them to sell trust, they better feel confident while they're doing it. So, like, you have to give them the freedom, especially as they're kind of learning the ropes, to be able to pull other people in more aggressively until they get that confidence.
There's two things I want to mention. The start of this call, we talked about, at the start of this particular piece, we spoke about how to prioritize if I don't have big teams. I just want to plug this thought for everybody listening. One of the most important things we teach is how to prioritize at ConnectWise and where we work. We've got a prioritization tool for our account managers. What's an A bucket account all the way down to what's a C bucket account, and how to prioritize effective outreach and communication, all of this kind of stuff. And by the way, the criteria for that is not always revenue. If not, revenue's like third, fourth on the list. What it is quality of the relationship. How much trust do we have? How much engagement from C-suite do we have? Because even if someone's not spending $20,000 a month, they're spending 500, but they're super engaged and they're on a growth trajectory. These are the companies we want to work with. These are the people. So it's really important to think about it. The second thing I want to look at and think about is when you're teaching sales, there's a wicked sentence which is always leave them wanting more. And it's how we create urgency, and it's how we create authority to ask for the next appointment. a lot of people think, well, I need to give a load of value up front. I need to give a load of information away up front and just bombard the customer with a ton of knowledge to make myself seem incredible. But sometimes, and not deliberately, but sometimes if we don't know the full extent of the answer, like you've just said, it's quite a strategic move to say, you know what, Brad, I don't have an answer that I'm confident that I would want to be told. I don't have that answer right now, but what I'd like is the opportunity. You go away and find this out for me from your buyer, from the person making this decision. I will find this out within the next 48 hours. How do you feel Friday, 2 p.m.? We jump back on a call. I come on with this information, but you tell me the next steps you need to see. And because there's a crucial question we haven't talked about yet that we should always be thinking about, which ties back into all of this, which is when you've made decisions like this before, how have you made those decisions? And that gives you the opportunity to really start to build urgency. Just conscious of time. Are you okay for time, or have we got to drop?
I am. Yep.
So I want to move into I didn't tell you about this part of the call, but I want to ask if you have a sales story that you want to share of where was the biggest learning for you overall. Like what was something that either concretes the lesson behind what you've talked about today, or what's a story you've got that really brings home what we've been discussing so far? Just a real-time story.
Yeah. So here's a story. Watching one of the most effective salesperson I've ever met. Very relational in how he would approach all of his work. He got to the point with his customers where the trust was such that I would watch him, and we'd get to the point where like one of our customers would need to do an upgrade. And I'm not talking about a trivial upgrade. It's like they need to buy a couple new servers. They need like 10 or 15 new workstations. So for a small business, a fairly significant investment.
A big amount of CapEx.
Right. And I would watch, and he would get his relationships to the point where he could pick up the phone. And even if they didn't answer, he would say, like, if the guy's name was Bill, he'd be like, hey, Bill, look, we've talked for a while about you needing to upgrade your network. I'm gonna put the order in on those 2 servers and those 10 workstations, and you're looking at about 30 grand plus another 20 for install. It's gonna be 50,000. Like, you got to spend the money because your other stuff is out. Like, you know how we work. Like, let's talk next week. All right, thanks, bye. And like, it was this. I called it the presumptive close. Like, he got to the point where he had trust. They had trust in him. And if for some reason, like if they were super pinched for money and just couldn't afford to do it, he would never put us in a position where like we couldn't use that equipment someplace else. But like here's what I learned through all of that was, one, some people need to be helped to make a decision. Right? Because I would watch that. Some people would sit on the fence, and I would watch this salesperson. How could they, in effect, make the decision for the person and then let them undo the decision if they didn't really want it made? Like, which to me seems super, super aggressive. But what I learned after watching him do this for years was, like, some people need help making a decision. I'll just put it that way. Like, some people are just not decision makers, but they're responsible for making a decision. So he would help, which led me to, I watched how he would work with different people. And what he would do was he understood almost the personality type of what he was dealing with. And he would get in their box all the time. He didn't sell out of his personality. He sold out of the personality of the person that was doing the buying.
I just want to add a piece here. I'm literally rewriting a ton of my content around this particular piece right now. When I teach junior level people how to prep for a call, I teach them it's you, your customer, their business, and then the level 200 stuff is their industry. And then the stories that help them understand, because one of the things a lot of people get wrong is the trends and how you use industry trends to link back to your persona issues, right? And we don't have time to go into that right now, but essentially what it is, if you can understand persona challenges and understand how the industry, how the trends globally, locally, whatever, will affect that person's job, you are suddenly incredibly important to this person very quickly. So if we take your example of Bill, I know that Bill's only ringing me to tell me I need this stuff because it's going to keep me at the forefront of my game. Now, the reason I've shared all of this, one of the crucial things we prep all reps for is to understand personal narrative before business narrative. If I understand what Brad personally cares about towards his career at the moment, and I tap into that and then align that to business initiatives, I've suddenly got a really good advocate on my side of the fence.
Yep.
And that is true. That's what I feel is true sales.
Brilliant.
Good salespeople can sell anything. And it's getting a bit dark in my room, so I'm going to turn the light on a second if we're still talking. But good salespeople will sell you anything, right? We've all heard about Jordan Belfort, sell me the pen, boiler room stuff. That's good sales, right? Just to convince someone, but that comes with a lot of buyer's remorse. Great salespeople help you actually feel as if they're on your side of the side of the table.
Yeah.
And they join you on that trust piece of, you know what?
Yeah.
I actually give a shit about you winning. I actually care about you, Brad, getting to where you want to get to. What I want to understand is, what do you need from me to make you look good to your board?
Right.
And God, if you can answer that question, it's game over. Brad, any final thoughts, any final comments, any final bits, any final lessons that you want to share?
Yeah. Well, one thought related to what you just said. A lot of times when you're going through the sales process, in my mind, what I've watched, if you do it right, the sale doesn't come down to if, but when. Like, you've convinced them that it's absolutely the right thing to do. The question is just, are we going to do it this week or next week, or like when does it happen? Like, that's what a lot of it comes down to. That, and one other thing, and this is always my go-to thing, that I've learned from watching good salespeople. One of the unwritten keys to successful selling is quick response. And because if the customer is waiting for you, they can't say yes.
Oh my gosh. So I just want to quickly add, my 6 elements of every single sales call, it starts with prep, it's opening, desired outcome, all of this kind of stuff. But the reason we leave, I got rid of the word closing when I worked for Amazon, simply because you never close anything, you progress it. And the progression from your side has to be done within 4 hours of a call, which is why you never book a call within 45 minutes of a call ending, because you always guarantee that call will invariably go over and your notes won't be fresh. And we try and use our mind as a filing cabinet, but we just can't ever do that.
Right.
So the trick is always, between every single call, 45 minutes. And even if a customer says, I have to talk to you at 3 p.m. and your call finishes at 2:45, I can't make it, but the best I can do is 3:30. The reason for it is because I'll probably have a call finishing and I want to make sure I'm turning up fresh and I'm not still thinking about the call I just came from. And it's only fair to you that you give me that time, right? And it's as simple as that. And 9 times out of 10, people will say, you know what, I'll take the half an hour as well, blah, blah, blah. We'll reschedule. I'll see you then. Really, really cool point, man. Any final thoughts, Brad? Any final closing statements?
Always fun to talk to you, Alex. I could talk about this stuff all day. It's fascinating to me.
Well, we're in Florida together soon, man. So that beer and a burger is on me. I promise you that.
Good.
And Brad, just from the bottom of my heart, man, thank you for the time. 44 minutes, absolutely incredible. If it's okay with you, I'll book you for a second interview, because what I want to talk about now is how to hire, right? And that kind of plugs the next kind of conversation. So just to sign off, Brad, any final top tips, any final giveaways? So we're usually talking to either sales director or junior level salespeople, or salespeople looking to go from usually 100 to 130% of quota attainment. Any final thoughts for any of those people?
Yeah. Gosh, it's sales is hard, right? I mean, sales is hard. Sales is hard, but you never go wrong investing in people. Like, if you invest in your salespeople and try to teach them the things that they need to know, those are skills that translate anywhere. Like, they're relationship skills. That's what almost all sales training is relationship training. So, like, do the work, invest in your people. Best way to grow your business is to grow your people. Invest in that training, make them work.
Brad Schow, I appreciate you, man. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you on the next call. Speak soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Alex.
Good, man. Dude,